Welcome to an enlightening journey into the heart of wisdom with the Living I Ching by the acclaimed author Deng Ming-Dao. Known for his revered work, 365 Tao, Deng Ming-Dao once again steps into the realm of ancient philosophy, offering us a groundbreaking and accessible translation of the I Ching. Rooted deeply in ancient tradition, this text transforms from a simple tool of divination into a profound guide for living in today's world. Deng Ming-Dao breathes new life into the I Ching, unraveling its complex symbols and ideas into actionable wisdom that speaks directly to the challenges of modern life. Through clarity and insight, the Living I Ching transcends being just a book. It's a trusted companion for those seeking balance and purpose. Discover how these age-old teachings can illuminate your path and offer clarity in decision-making. The Living I Ching assists you in understanding the cycles of change, empowering you to harness them for personal growth. Embrace each hexagram as a stepping stone on your journey toward a more harmonious life. Join Deng Ming-Dao in this remarkable exploration and embrace the wisdom of the ancients as a guiding light for your modern-day challenges. Step into a life guided by the wisdom of the Living I Ching and embark on a journey towards a more enlightened and fulfilling existence.
Yeah, I don't think it has to be.
Yeah,
I think just I think the only things that I find that are would be quote scary about it is like, oh my God, how did it know?
yeah,
Right? Because it's like,
exactly.
oh, this is like a little too close, right?
Yeah,
And then the other thing that I find more scary than the text is sometimes it takes a long time for the prediction to manifest in a way that's like, oh, this is not what I thought the word said,
hmm
and now here it is, and it's completely apt,
hmm
and now I have to deal with it,
yes,
right? So, yeah, those I'm not so scared about the book itself or the words itself as to how it manifests itself. But the point always, the subtext always is that you're supposed to respond to that
right.
in both
Yeah.
cases, right? Because in bad fortune, you're not supposed to lose it
Mhm,
or give up. It never says, you're screwed, give up. It
mhm,
never says that, right?
mhm.
And you're supposed to, and then that's what the guidance is about, how you deal with the bad fortune. But the same is true of good fortune. You're not supposed to go crazy and say, oh, like I'm a millionaire now, I don't have to worry.
Mhm.
You're supposed to be careful at that point.
Yeah,
So good and bad, I used to get like depressed, when it's bad. And then when it's good, like, oh, well, then everything's fine. It's going to be great. And neither is true.
yeah,
You still have to do the work.
yeah. So let's start officially the talk
Okay.
now. Um,
Okay.
yeah, so I really want to thank you for accepting my invitation on this talk.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Like I said earlier, that I've read 365 Tao, I've read The Wandering Taoist, I've read, and now I'm going into the Living I Ching. And I really like the way you write in the Living I Ching. It's very poetic. It leaves a lot of room to be open on different ends of the spectrum.
Good.
And I
Good.
really like the idea that you speak about the scholars and the philosophers, and sometimes it kind of becomes exclusionary based on their expertise, and you've kept it open with
Hmm.
our own individual subjective interpretation as a process as we read and we ourselves go deeper in our own awareness to extract what we can from the book, but not only that, to use it also to allow our own awakening and consciousness to develop in a deeper way, not just as a divination book, fortune telling book, but also as something similar to the Tao Te Ching, to allow us to reflect our own awareness and perception and to widen our perception as we go deeper into it. So,
Yes, I think both books that you mentioned are meant to be tools of self-cultivation. You're not supposed to just go there as a consultant and go, tell me some good news. Oh, fine. Then I can go on with my day. You're supposed to ponder it, use it, see how those lessons manifest themselves ultimately,
Mm-hmm.
and then rely on yourself. That's one of the underlying messages of the I Ching. You have to rely on yourself. But if you're going to rely on yourself, how true are you?
Mm-hmm.
How smart are you? How wise are you? How strong are you? How persevering are you? And those answers aren't meant to be given one time.
Mm-hmm.
They're meant to be given every day the rest of your life. Can you keep it up? Can you be pure? Can you be moral? Because the I Ching and the Tao Te Ching always call upon us to be moral and ethical. What happens when that ethical choice means a sacrifice, a temporary sacrifice for yourself? Will you make it?
Yeah.
And you'll make it if you understand the idea that being spiritual is to see far, to see beyond just your immediate circumstances, to look at the long game, and to make decisions that are good not just for you, but for the people around you too. It's not enough to just say, oh, he's got something, I'll take his.
Mm-hmm.
That's not okay, right?
Yeah.
So, what happens when you have to do something that is benefiting to the whole community, but maybe not quite to your advantage?
Yes. Yes.
You should still do it, right? But that takes cultivation, patience, and the knowledge that in the end, the community will come back and support you. But it's not a dollar for dollar kind of exchange. It's a participation and an investment in yourself and the community. That's what both the Tao Te Ching and the I Ching would want you to do.
Very nice. Um, I have a few questions listed here, but you just spoke about morality and the word pure, and also the Tao Te Ching and the I Ching talks about virtue a lot. In your understanding, just to give everybody else a clearer idea of this, because as soon as you think moral, you think maybe religious from your own conditioned beliefs about morality. In your understanding, what do you mean when you say moral or being pure? Or, and I don't know if you want to include virtue in that, or if that's something else.
Okay, so think about this. We use the word virtue in two different ways.
Mm-hmm.
Virtue, in one way, means goodness and morality.
Mm-hmm.
But we also use virtue to mean a kind of inherent power. When we say, I did this by virtue of, it was able to achieve this by virtue of.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have this idea not just of some precepts, but of some sort of inherent power and ability mixed together. Okay, so that double meaning happens to apply to the Chinese too. And so we have the sense of virtue as morality,
Mm-hmm.
but in the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu gives the primary example of virtue as the actions of heaven and earth.
Yeah.
Um, Tao gives birth, virtue fosters, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if virtue fosters, then it's not just it's nice or good, it has this power, a power that even perhaps Tao doesn't quite have altogether. It takes virtue to foster it. I mean, that's a sort of false dichotomy because you look at the title, Tao Te Ching, in Chinese, Tao De can be considered a single term. And those who say it's Tao and virtue and so on, we're caught up in English grammar
Mm-hmm.
in a concept that doesn't exist in Chinese. So Tao and virtue are synonymous. Tao gives birth, virtue fosters.
Mm-hmm.
What is virtue fostering? It's fostering life. Every single creature on this planet lives because of the generosity, if you will, of heaven and earth. Take you and me. You put us in a room with nothing, we could not do anything to survive. We can't make air. We can't make water. We can't make light. We can't make heat. Everything that helps us live comes to us for free. And so the generosity of heaven and earth, that heaven and earth support all things and ask nothing in return, ask no ownership. They don't even ask us to behave a certain way. It's just you're constantly enabled to live, yes? But that enabling to live did not come from you. It came from heaven and earth.
Yes.
It's important to see that heaven and earth are defined in the Tao Te Ching as impartial. They don't care. They don't have any human emotions. They don't play favorites. The idea that, there's a chosen people is utterly ridiculous and fictitious. Everything on this planet is supported by heaven and earth and by extension by Tao. And because their lives are fostered by virtue, that makes the support of life the greatest virtue of all. And so when we talk about virtue, we're not talking about a bunch of ideas that old people drone at us. We're talking about emulating the very nature of this existence, which is to be impartially kind to everybody. That is what we should do as virtuous people, not because we're trying to behave ourselves, but because we're trying to be like everything else in this world. And guess what? Out of all the living creatures in this world, only human beings have the audacity to defy what is natural. We're the only ones who make that mistake. We're the only ones who need fixing. And so that's why we have to get back to virtue, to get back to a natural state. And that natural state is to be kind and to support life. So to try to reject virtue as being, it's just an artificial thing that's said in temples and churches and so on, is missing the point. Virtue is natural. It is the most natural quality of all. And so if we want to be good people, it's only to be natural and virtuous. Now, you said you read the Wilhelm version. Have you ever looked at the Chinese version of the I Ching at all?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, in the Wilhelm version, it keeps saying over and over, supreme success, perseverance furthers.
Yes.
Right? That comes from 4 words. And they're recombined. Sometimes all 4 words appear. Sometimes it's only a pair of them, and so on and so forth, right? The last word in that sequence is the word Zhen, which means purity, orthodoxy, chastity. So again, in the very formula of the I Ching is this idea of purity and chastity. That's what we're called upon to be whenever there is a problem. We don't call upon the I Ching for minor things like, I got to go to the store. And we don't call upon it for things that we know we can do, like, can I cook breakfast? Well, we know we can cook breakfast. We only call upon the I Ching when it is mind-meltingly awful and we don't know what to do. And what does the I Ching tell us in that formula? That our purity and chastity is an important and necessary ingredient in whatever we're facing. See, we don't get to lose it. We don't get to reject circumstances. We're supposed to stay conscious and engaged in it. But what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to look with our own purity and our own orthodoxy, right? That is where virtue plugs in. Now, when we're frantic, starving, being attacked, and so on, maybe we'll say, the last thing I want to think about is virtue. But the I Ching is saying, ask yourself what the right thing to do is. not just can I get benefit for myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what is the right thing to do? So virtue, to me, is inarguable because from the Taoist point of view, it's embedded in the example of heaven and earth.
Mm-hmm.
That the outcome of virtue is inarguable because it's because of virtue that all creatures live. And if you want a simple formula for how to be virtuous, it's can you choose and support and nurture life?
Mm-hmm.
Just apply that formula and it'll guide you a long way. It will also guide you in seeing how immoral most of the people in our world are, especially our politicians,
Mm-hmm.
because their decisions do not support everyone's lives.
Yeah.
Just apply that formula and you'll see what virtue is and the need for virtue still.
Mm. Very nice. Very nice. Yes. As a martial artist too, it's very hard to comprehend virtue because it's so easy for the ego to come in as you train and become better. And so now, like you said, a lot of people look for divination and fortune telling to have that, get that edge in life. Okay, what should I do to become better? What should I do to do this? And you read about stories about the kings of old using the fortune tellers, the I Ching, also to get that extra leg, if you will, or that advantage. But I really like, especially, I'm gonna ask you now because you said it's about human life and nurturing human life, and it brought me to your the title, like the Living I Ching, right? So it's all about living. It's not. You mentioned in your book you wanted to call it all encompassing, like the circle. I believe from the Zhou dynasty. So talk about a little bit about living with virtue, because as a martial artist, we can look for virtue, but then there's that virtuous ego. Is that such a thing, or have you seen that in the world of cultivation and masters and teachers? This virtuosity, I'm virtuous, but it comes a little bit from another identity fueled by the ego sometimes.
Right. Well, then they're only pretending, right?
Hmm.
So, and pretense is not reality.
Hmm.
So, and you have to know a lot of different kinds of masters because yeah, they're the kinds of teachers you're talking about.
Hmm.
Then there are kinds of teachers who say don't call me master, who claim nothing,
Yeah,
but their abilities are a matter of public knowledge, so they say nothing.
yeah, exactly.
I think that's a better one. I will go through the explanation, but let me ask you a quick question. Would you stand up and protect someone who is weaker, who is being attacked?
Yes,
And what if that person was a stranger? Would you still help that person?
yeah.
Okay, so that's one small example where the martial ability is used in the service of virtue.
Mhm.
Because maybe that person you're defending is at risk of their lives. So by stepping in and protecting them, then you are supporting life, yes?
Yeah.
We also, in modern times, have foolishly forgotten the context of martial arts in a uh, older Chinese society.
Mm.
You talked about, being from the islands. What if the islands were attacked? Would everyone not try to defend themselves? And that was the case in China. Look how many of the martial arts styles are family styles. Chen family style, for example. Why? Because their village was attacked,
Oh wow.
right?
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, well, you don't have to go far to look it up. But these villages were attacked all the time by marauders and raiders.
Mm.
Don't forget, maybe even just a century or two ago, there was no police force.
Mhm.
No one was going to come to save you. Like nowadays, we go, wait, call us for help, right?
Yes.
No one's going to come, and these guys are there, to slaughter you.
Mm-hmm.
You had to know martial arts. Why are martial arts associated with the temples? Because the temples were supporting themselves with farmlands so they could feed the monks.
Yes.
And then the farms were attacked. And then plus, now I'm sure you could see this in China now. Hey, let's go pick on the bald-headed guy. Let's go pick on the guy with the beard. They're all vegetarians. We could kick their butts easily.
Mm-hmm.
They had to defend themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one small example. But no, the idea that I am going to study martial arts and Taoism and the I Ching to get one up on somebody else,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a foolish ambition.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what they're for. And I fundamentally object to that.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, sure, you could get an advantage over someone. It's easy for anyone. If you are more educated, you can trick someone who's naive, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to go around and deceive people and bully people.
Mm-hmm.
Should we? Is this what you trained for? You train hours just so you can kick the butt of somebody who's skinnier and weaker than you?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no nobility or honor in that at all.
Yes.
And then the idea that, I get something because I'm in this tournament, in a cage fight, great costume, and so on. Think back to those villagers.
Mm-hmm.
They're fighting to protect their family, their land. That has far more nobility than did I get a trophy,
Yes.
right? Now, we're going to talk in layers. If you're a martial artist and you're in a fight, your concern is to win. And you win no matter what. And if that means that you deceive the other person, you do a feint, you trick them, you insult them, you get them mad, you do all of that. Anything is justifiable to win. But that doesn't make it true morality or the way that you should behave outside the ring,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So then you have to ask yourself, why are you training? Are you training just to beat the next guy? Because who cares? Say you beat 50, 60, 100, 300, 1,000. Is that enough? And maybe you've met people who check their net worth hourly, check their stocks hourly,
Mm-hmm.
who are always boasting about, I went to this great school, I have this money, look at my trophy wife, I have an expensive sports car. Isn't that pathetic? Is that really going to make you a better person?
Mm-hmm.
So, martial arts, you can't fake it.
Yeah.
You have to do the training.
Yes.
If you want something, you have to work for it. And if you can't do it, then you say, I'm going to keep on until I can do it. And it's the second year, third year, fifth year, you still can't do it and you're still trying to do it. That changes you, yes?
Yeah.
Then that's why martial arts is for self-cultivation, not just to get over on somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use it in the service, martial arts in the service of protecting others, for protecting your family, as I alluded to with the villages,
Mm-hmm.
protecting your country,
Mm-hmm.
because back in the mid 20th century, martial arts was also called the national art, because it was the pride of China and the way that they were trying to defend themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And then martial arts, since you studied Wudong and Taoist martial arts, that that segues into internal alchemy.
Yeah.
And the sequence of Jing, Qi to Shen is about personal transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can follow that sequence, once you get to that point, beating the next guy is trivial.
Exactly. Yes.
And it doesn't accrue any great honor to you,
Yes.
right? There's more nobility in the person who has ground away trying to learn this, trying to do this, trying to perfect themselves year after year than someone who's, quote, talented, and maybe they win a bunch of fights and so on, and then they quit. Now, you're not as old as I am. I'll tell you, and I'm not that great at martial arts at all, and that's just a fact.
Mhm.
But everyone else I came up with quit decades ago. And some of the Sifu I know on walkers, canes.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So if you can't, we're not talking about going the distance in 15 rounds. We're talking about going the distance to the end of your life.
Yes.
That's the measure of a martial artist.
Very nice.
How well did you do year after year after year? What good did you do for people year after year after year?
Mm.
That's the better standard to me of martial arts and its relationship to spirituality.
Very nice. I think that's a great message for martial arts teacher, and even a lot of people now, they're mostly exposed to the modern martial arts and the mixed martial arts. So this is a great understanding of the traditional aspect of traditional martial arts, because the tradition, meaning not that it's old or it's dogmatic, but you're constantly striving to do it from a sense of, like you said, morality, purity, developing your virtue, and at the end of the day, nurturing life, helping your immediate environment. So the Living I Ching, tell me about the title, the Living I Ching, as opposed to just the I Ching.
Oh, the idea was that the I Ching keeps changing to me. I think it keeps changing.
Hmm.
So, you know, for example, that there were two earlier versions that have been lost,
Yes.
right? And then you know that the I Ching as it exists now has at least three layers, right? One from King Wen, one from Confucius, and one from the Duke of Zhou.
Mm.
So it's not just like one person sat down and wrote it. It evolved, right?
Yes.
And also, why did King Wen come in and like, oh, he changed the order completely?
Hmm.
That's like insane, right? I mean, what kind of either audacity or wisdom do you have to remake an entire holy book?
Yeah. Wow.
So the point is that the book is evolving and developing, right? And then we know the 10 wings were added, I think, probably in the Han Dynasty as a further commentary.
Yes.
So you have this stacked, all these layers going, right? Now, people use it for divination,
Yes.
generation after generation. I believe that all these people using the I Ching are adding to its spirit, if you will.
Okay. Nice.
As you're thinking about it, as you're talking about it, as you activate it, as you share about it, and so on, the role of the book and its messages keep changing and developing, right?
Hmm.
Also, we continue to study it and we derive knowledge and ideas from it beyond its original text. So if it talks about riding horses, well, maybe we're not riding horses now, right?
Hmm.
But maybe we can apply that to other things.
Yeah.
And so, in that way, the wisdom of the I Ching continues to develop and evolve. And that makes it living. And that's why the book is titled that.
Wow. Very nice. So for some of the listeners, what if they say, okay, this is a book, and if it's continuously evolving, then are the words changing and are we missing the meaning? That fear, that fear comes up that when you read a book uh, that was written thousands of years ago, you want to know exactly what they said and is it the correct sentence, or else if I don't get it correct, then everything I learn is a lie. And so that fear sets in that when somebody hears something is evolving in their mind, they think it has changed from its original meaning. What would you say?
Yeah. There's always a temptation to cleave towards that kind of originalism.
Yes.
But let me just give you a comparison to martial arts. So, what if you learn these techniques and they're not permitted in the rule book of your modern bout?
Hmm.
Are they still real or not? right? What if some of those techniques depend on things that don't quite exist anymore, like hooking your finger on someone's armor?
Yeah.
Well, then should you modify it?
Mm-hmm.
Or should you say, hey, this is the way it was always done?
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And
I noticed this for another example. Sorry to cut you off, but in terms of Chinese
okay.
medicine acupuncture, I also see this. They started off a certain way, but not a lot of these ways of healing. It's not done in its original format. Say, for instance, acupuncture, from the
Mm,
stone to now
mm,
the technology
mm.
of a very thin stainless steel needle, and it's very effective. But it's come a long way since the original piercing the skin with a big thick piece of stone, and it doesn't mean
Yeah,
it's lost its value. It hasn't lost its purity, so to speak. It's just it can be practiced in a more efficient way now.
right. So there's no one rigid way to do it.
Yes.
Some of the old things are better,
Hmm.
right? I would prefer I don't take Chinese herbs much anymore because I'm apprehensive of the pesticides and the pollution.
Yes.
So was it better before,
Yes.
there was heavy metals in the ground? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've seen some of the herbs over the decades, just like the quality has just declined horribly,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, like a herb that was like as thick as your finger now is as thin as a matchstick, and
Mm-hmm.
you can't get the thicker ones anymore. They
Mm-hmm.
just don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So, we have to judiciously allow for our tradition to be modernized, right? It doesn't mean that everything old is good, but we should go back and look at the language of the original text, I feel. Even if we can't read Chinese, we might have to rely on good bilingual translations or looking up words.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the problem. I don't think that Chinese words in the classics can be read in only one way, right?
Yes.
And therefore, if they have to be read in multiple ways,
Mm-hmm.
we need to be able to understand that.
Yes.
Okay. So if we're trying to get the message might come to us, let's say 4 or 5 words,
Mm-hmm.
but those 4 or 5 words might be validly interpreted in several ways. And maybe all those ways apply, but because we say, I only want to know one way, or I only know what somebody translated, and who knows how skillful that translator was. And my reservation about the Wilhelm version is it's a translation of a translation, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the 𝐃𝐸𝐬𝐽's translation of a German text,
Mm-hmm.
of a Chinese text. Like,
Wow.
oh, aren't we getting a little far away at that point,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So it's better to go back to the original and try to decipher what the words mean and understand that those words can mean multiple things at once. That's the difficulty of traditional Chinese scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
We want them to be one way, but they're written to be multifaceted. And if we don't get that, we lose something.
Wow. Yes. It's like a form in the martial arts. It's not just meant for one thing, not just self-defense. It's meant for physical fitness.
Right. Have you had this? Oh, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I've had this experience where I go to a teacher. It's like, oh, okay, what's this? What's this? What's this? And then they'll show this, and they'll show, and it's derived from this.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, I thought that was an offensive move, and now you're using it defensively. And
Mm-hmm.
they go, yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then then they'll do this flip or something. I said, well, what's this? And they'll say, well, it's from this form. I said, but this form is like big and stuff, and you only went like this.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yes. Yes.
okay.
Exactly.
So from a martial arts standard, it's like, is it a kick? Is it a block? Is it a step? They
Mm-hmm.
go, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, what do I know then? I'll just like keep practicing, right? But in martial arts alone, they use the forms in multiple ways,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And by the way, if you compare sets, let's just say Tai Chi, and different styles of Tai Chi, two forms named the same don't even look close to each other. Like, oh, this is called this. And then you go to this next school, it's called the same thing, but it doesn't even look like it.
Right.
You're still calling it the same. Why? Study, practice,
Yeah.
you'll figure it out,
Yeah.
right?
And what
So,
that family
but
took from that form and what uh, they wanted to make,
derive from it.
yeah, they wanted to derive from it and the make it a topic of contemplation for their school. So some might make the forms more internal, some might make it, more external, more healing. Different
Ah,
things.
but you see why? Because the master is adding his or her own insight to that.
Mm-hmm.
And that you asked about the word living. I would rather learn from that kind of teacher.
Yes.
I want to, I know that there are people who say, I will do it exactly like so and so did back in the 19th century. I want to know what someone's experience was,
Oh, yes.
what their insight was,
Mm-hmm.
right? So my current teacher grew up with, with a dear friend, and they're about the same in terms of, winning medals and fame and so on. They don't look anything alike
Yes.
in their form. And they studied from the same teacher simultaneously,
Mm-hmm.
and the teacher taught them two different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Said, oh, you should do it this way, and then you should do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
You see, there's this idea of the text or the scriptures or the martial arts forms being this objective set of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this other idea about it being tailored to the person who carries that knowledge, and that person infusing that knowledge with his or her own insights and experiences. That's why we go to a living teacher. That's why we don't just like learn off YouTube, right?
Yes.
We need to get that essence and that experience, and that forms a lineage all the way back through their masters. That's a different kind of originalism.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about the originalism of the text. I want to know the intact purity of the line going back as far as possible.
Yes.
And studying with a living person like that is far better than just looking at books.
Yes. Exactly. One is a kind of a dead rehearsal, and one is a living, breathing um, expansion of consciousness, continually
Yeah,
expanding.
they are an embodiment of that.
Yeah.
And that's why when they pass their knowledge on to us, that's why we value it so much.
Yes.
And that's why AI will never be able to teach Taoism or martial arts,
Yes.
right? It's got to be person to person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, life.
Yes. Yeah, I notice whenever I speak to my teacher, and he also talks about a lot of these things were direct transmission from teacher to teacher in
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's superior, I think. But you still do have to study.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
you still have to practice, and you still should read,
Mm-hmm.
because sometimes a teacher will just make a reference to something,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're supposed to know. Like, for example, when you were in China, you must have heard people using proverbs and phrases, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so like you're just supposed they like four words, and then well, actually, it alludes to this like entire passage in a book somewhere,
Yes.
and you're just supposed to know that,
Yes. Yes.
right? And then if you don't, if you're new to this, then that's why we do research and study in the background, just so that we don't waste our teacher's time going, well, now will you tell me what those four words meant and explain it to me? It's like you're supposed to know,
Yeah.
right?
And I find I like meditation and I like the practice, but I find reading takes you into another state of meditation, another
Yeah,
pondering, contemplation,
right.
and this is what I was telling you before we started reading your book. The the poetic language also takes you on a journey. You call it a pilgrimage, that you
Hmm.
go and you come back to the same thing.
Hmm.
But I think this is the
Hmm.
beauty of what we're all doing. All the information's out there, but we're going at it in our own way of contemplation, understanding. We all have our own individual process, and we come back to that point. And I think that's the beauty of some of the books you've written. It allows you to take that journey and reflection
Yeah,
using your
yeah.
words to reflect your inner reality and come back to a place of understanding, knowing. So I wanted to ask you, a lot of people, we've heard a lot about Lao Tzu. We heard a lot about Huangdi, the Yellow Emperor. You don't hear quite a lot about Fushi. So I sent you some questions. So I have it here. In your own words, what does, and by the way, your book is one of the only ones that you've gone into a little bit about Fuji and who he is. Not a lot of text mention him. So what does Fushi represent to you? And not just a mythical figure, but as a way of perceiving the world. And how can we reconnect with that way of looking at the world as Fushi did?
Well, so can we set aside the questions of whether Fushi was a real person or not?
Okay, for sure.
You know, whether he was half man and half snake,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. And so, based on that, we have to consider what Fushi means to us as a symbol of how we might be.
Mm-hmm.
And what did he do? He got his knowledge from nature. So, according to the legends, he was sitting on the banks of a river, and this river tortoise came out, and he saw the trigrams on its back. Now, that may or may not be true, but the point is that he got his knowledge directly from nature. He didn't get it from a book,
Mm-hmm.
and in contrast to, let's just say, a Greek philosopher's, and this is not a put down, it's just an observation, he doesn't try to construct a system from a logical argument.
Mm-hmm.
It's revelatory. That's a big difference, yes?
Yeah.
Now, the next thing is, what about the trigrams themselves that he perceived? They give us a complete understanding of the world. And so, the trigrams are set in an octagonal arrangement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the right way to consider the trigrams is to imagine yourself in the center with them surrounding you.
Mm-hmm.
So, what does that show you? There's heaven and earth, water and fire, wind and thunder, right? Lake and mountain. You're in a natural setting again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So his the mathematical significance of the trigrams is derived or associated with a natural world.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no such thing as intellect versus reality. Your intellectuality is derived from reality. So do you see the schisms that exist in Western thought never were there at the beginnings of Chinese thought?
Mm-hmm.
That's important. Now, how do we get from the world around us to abstract thought? Well, the trigrams give us that bridge because they express naturalistic ideas in a graphic and a mathematical way, and in a system that is mathematically complete, right? There's no leftover number or anything like that. It all fits together. What does that tell you about the way we ought to think? There's no line that's like, oh, I can leave that one out. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have all the lines, right? And out of the 64 hexagrams, yeah, maybe you're given one or two to consider for your situation. That doesn't invalidate the rest of them.
Mm-hmm.
And they still provide a context for your whole inquiry, even if they're not, quote, chosen by the book. You have to think about your predicament in the context of all the possibilities. And we should do that. We do that. But we don't always like to do that or admit that we do that.
Mm-hmm.
So you see how he's in nature, he's observing nature, He sees a complete way to express nature. He bridges that idea of seeing nature to a graphic and mathematical system that can be manipulated.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty impressive, right?
Yes, yes.
In addition, what else did he do? He looked at the beginnings of what we need for civilization: medicine, domestication, music, writing. And that means that those are fundamental aspects of human life, right?
Yeah.
So before we say the fundamentals, you know how they're always saying in economic broadcasts, the fundamentals are good or the fundamentals are bad. There's deeper than whatever's going on with the economy or world events or so on. The fundamentals are still, can people feed themselves?
Mm-hmm.
Can they express themselves?
Yes, oh, I understand.
Can they take care of themselves? Can they be healthy?
Mm-hmm.
Can they understand their role in nature? So to sum up, Fushi represents the ideal person in nature who understands the truths around him, extends them through his thought into a complete system of philosophy and so on, and is always grounded in the fundamentals of what people need. And that's the basis of civilization, and we shouldn't drift too far from it.
Very nice. We, the way we read the Tao Te Ching with the 81 verses, can we just pick up the I Ching and read 1 through 64 when we want without looking for that, um, the fortune telling aspect or the divination aspect? Can we just, because what I do sometimes, I would like the first trigram and the second trigram, Chen and Kun, Chen and Kun. I really like, understanding that. And I can maybe get up only to a couple or several, but can one study them individually? And with that studying individually, just like you with the Tao Te Ching, in your words, does it become alive in you? So as you go out and you live, it's automatically there as a kind of software within your consciousness. Is that possible, or is that one of the ways you can approach this I Ching?
I not only think it's possible, I think it's necessary.
Mm,
And I think it's better than using the book as a system of divination.
yes.
It's better to internalize the book, understand its ideas, and if you're going to make a mistake, make your own mistake.
Mm, yeah,
Own it.
yes.
So let's say you do something and then you say, "Oh, I'm taking the advice of the I Ching," and then it doesn't work out the way you want. Then are you going to say either that you misinterpreted or that the book was wrong?
Mhm.
Here's the problem with human thought. Have you noticed, by the way? Nature is immediate. Nature doesn't think.
Yes.
Nature doesn't say, well, I think tomorrow I'm going to do this, or I want to do him a favor, I'm going to send. No, nature does nothing like that, right?
Mhm.
We have to think. You talked about martial arts. Yes, it might be very fast, but we're always in behind the event because we have to see, we have to process, we have to think, we have to plan, strategize, and react.
Mhm.
What we try to do in martial arts is try to get it down to reflex action, right? And to empty ourselves so we're reacting and just participating in the flow of it so we don't get that thinking idea.
Mhm.
Same thing when people are, uh, I don't know what to do. I have to go home and check the I Ching. Well, thank God, like 5 hours has slipped by and the event is like way over
Yes.
and you probably missed an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And so that only makes you dumb, forgive me,
Yeah.
because it's like, oh, I got to go back and ask a book what to do.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so it's better to study and internalize it. And here are some ideas, right? It's you just alluded to reading 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is set up in pairs.
Mm-hmm.
So the odd number hexagram is the first one, and the second one, the next one, the even number, is always the reversal of that.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? What does it mean to have one idea and then the reversal of that?
Mm-hmm.
You see, you have to compare and think about both of them. And then you think, well, hey, 1 might be good and 2 might be bad. No, it's not like that
No.
at all, right?
No.
So, and then you think, well, if I get this one, it's a bad news. And if I get this one, it's good news. But then if you start to really read it, nothing is all good and all bad.
Yes.
There's so much nuance and subtlety, right? And then sometimes it's a surprise to see the image that Confucius has attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought this was a great idea, and now he's going like, oh, you have to be careful.
Mm-hmm.
Or, oh, now it looks like everything is wonderful, and he's saying you have to cultivate yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, so why? You see, it's just like we were saying about words. Words don't have just one meaning. The hexagrams don't have just one meaning. And the hexagrams have to be seen in context, at least with their paired
Wow. Yeah.
hexagram, right?
So 1 through
Okay.
64, they're being paired 1 through 60.
There are 32 pairs.
Yeah.
And so the next one, the first one is one way, says heaven,
Yeah.
is all yang lines.
Creative and the receptive.
And then earth is all yin lines, right?
Yes.
So it's either a yin yang reversal,
Yeah.
or sometimes that doesn't work because the hexagram's like symmetrical or something. And so it's turned over, it's flipped.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So now, what does that tell you? Even that reversal is significant, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you can go through there and understand that, here's the other thing. Here's another thing. Heaven, all straight lines. Earth, all split lines.
Mm-hmm.
And only at the end is there a complete, perfect stacking of alternation of yin and yang lines. But in my dim mind, well, then that must be ideal, right? No. So, and in fact, is there anything that's all good in the I Ching? If you read carefully, no.
No.
And is there anything at all bad? No.
No.
I thought when I started, okay, there's got to be something that's like, quote, the worst.
Trigram.
And there isn't one.
Yes.
There isn't one,
No.
right? So, and here's one thing, my feeling was like, oh, what's the worst? Well, death, right? Death has to be worst.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I think the worst thing. Are we
Sorry.
okay? I think the worst thing in the I Ching is alienation. When we are divorced from our community and our nation, that's when we are truly isolated. That's the worst, right? Everything else can be overcome. Well, that can be too if you just join, right? So we should read through the I Ching as a whole and embody its knowledge and its philosophy, and that will make us better people, really.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Very nice. Dang, I have a few more questions, but it's according to your time. We already hit an hour, and I want to be respectful of your time.
Oh, why don't we just try one more question?
Yes. So I
Okay.
have one more. Um, Actually, you already answered the question about do you think the I Ching is just a book of divination or also work of philosophy? But I really wanted to get to the I Ching and the Tao Te Ching as a pair. So they're the two most significant books, maybe in Taoism, yet they seem to have a different or offer a different approach. In your view, what are the main differences between them and how do they complement each other? And can we understand one through the other and vice versa?
Okay. So, do we understand what we mean by Taoism? We should not look at this through a contemporary lens, but we have to understand that what is now classified as Taoism is many different streams of thought that evolved in China.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no founder of Taoism, right? It arose from among the people. And in the thousands of years that occurred, some things dropped out and some things were kept and so on. And they all got bound up in the word Taoism.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? In addition, even if you look at Taoism closer to our current times, like say the last 100 years, there are many different sects of Taoism, just like there are different denominations of Christianity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even within Catholicism, there are different kinds of Catholicism, Franciscan, Dominican, and so on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're just going to say, oh, Taoism, we have to look beyond just the label that's in the bookstore that says, oh, this is Eastern philosophy of Taoism. It's not one thing. It was many things. So to expect one book or two books to represent the whole of this is not realistic, right? So what we want to say is, how are the I Ching and the Tao Te Ching important books for those who want to study Tao?
Mm-hmm.
And both of them are highly important. Okay? I think the ideas of the I Ching, the most important idea of the I Ching is that everything is cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
And the I Ching has a mathematical basis, right, in the trigrams and the lines and so on, right? In the way that you access it for divination, if you use the arrow stalks, you have to use numbers,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's an attempt to create a complete system of thought that is completely congruent,
Mm-hmm.
completely structured by mathematics, and therefore thorough.
Okay.
Right? It's said the idea of the I Ching is that all life is cyclical. It never says that. And this is why, again, to say, oh, I only want to study the words is like not enough.
Mm-hmm.
What does it say in the Wings, the great treatise? It says, the sun rises, the moon sets, the sun rises, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the way it expresses this idea of cyclical nature. But how does it do that?
Hello, everyone. Apologies for losing the last part of the recording. We would sincerely like to express our heartfelt thanks to Sifu Deng Ming-Dao. His graciousness and generosity with his time were truly remarkable. He opened up in such a profound way, sharing insights that have enlightened so many of us. Hope to provide more talks like this for everyone listening today.